Hey, Velomobile fans. There are a lot of reasons I moved to the Netherlands, most of them related to current events in the US. However, there was also a cycling element. See, if you haven't noticed, I really like riding bike, and the Netherlands just happens to be a pretty nice place to bike. Zeeland is particularly good for cycling. Now, I happen to live near Belgium, which also has a lot of bike routes, and I think they need to be explored. I decided for my first big ride in a Velomobile to ride to Brugge in Belgium. It looked interesting from the bus, and what better way to explore than with a bike, right? Now, it's not that long of a ride, so I decided to add a few extra miles and head first to the ocean. My route to the beach took me through the town of Oostbrug, past the Grote Gat, which is called the Big Hole, which is a wetland area. If you're thinking Oostbrug doesn't have much Dutch character, that's because Oostbrug was flattened by Allied bombing on October 6, 1944. Bombings that turned out to be militarily pointless. Oostbrug has the distinction of having been attacked quite a few times, ranging from Viking raids to attacks by the Count of Flanders and the people of Gent, lootings by the English, flooding, an attack by the Austrians, the Belgian Revolt, and World War II. Maybe Oostbrug just decided looking boring would help avoid future attacks. From Oostbrug, I headed west through Zoutzand, past the windmill to Retranchement, which also has a windmill. Now, according to Wikipedia, Zoutzand, like Kadzand, Kuzand, Vulpen, and Schoonvelde, used to be on a sandbank in the mouth of the river Zwin. The construction of low dikes created the Zoutzand polder. Like any habitable land in the Netherlands, people decided to build houses here. During the 15th century, it merged with the island of Kadzand. During the 80 Years' War, the area was partly flooded. Welcome to the general history of the Netherlands, eh? You might also note that most trees here have a distinct lean to them. You might have heard that part about how the Netherlands is windy. Yeah. But we digress. Returning to Retranchement. Fortifications were built here in 1622 to protect against invasion by the Spanish. This also used to be an important border crossing on a tram line to the seashore in Breskens, and also saw heavy fighting in World War II. Along with Sluis, it was the last place Canadian troops liberated during the Battle of the Scheldt. Outside of Retranchement, I crossed the border into Belgium and a giant wildlife reserve on gravel trails. I passed an entrance to the Zwin Nature Park, the most important nature reserve on the Belgian part of the Zwin River. The park has a lot of seabirds, dune rabbits, a breeding station for storks, and a small bird sanctuary where stranded birds are cared for. Knakke is a sprawling, posh beach resort town in Belgium and has been attracting sunseekers since the late 1800s when the Zwin River was closed off, leaving a bunch of wetlands and forming a canal for shipping to the port of Zeebrugge. Knakke also has some ugly history, being involved in the 100 Years' War, attacked by the English, strategically flooded by the Austrians, then the War of Religions with more flooding and devastation, a period where it was part of the Netherlands, and of course, World War II. Leaving Knakke to join the canal, I had some minor navigational issues. My GPS screen is kinda small and I have a bad habit of taking the wrong turn in the wrong place. canal I'm following part of the way to Brugge is the abandoned Leopolds Canal. The main canal to Brugge didn't look as nice to cycle along, at least on the map. The Leopolds Canal, however, is great for cycling, especially if you want to zoom in a Velomobile. About halfway to Brugge, I turned to head south along the Damse Canal through the small town of Dam. Dam was one of the major ports of Europe in the 13th century and the outlet to the sea for Brugge. The canal I'm riding along was formerly the River Raya, which connected it with Brugge. Now the canal ends in Sluis, and on a ride later in the year, I rode the entire canal from Brugge to Sluis, which is super prime riding. Damme was the site of the Battle of Damme, fought on the 30th and 31st of May 1213, when an English fleet under the Earl of Salisbury captured scores of French ships and their cargo of gold, silver, wine, bacon, and other delectables. I'm assuming after that they had a big party. Now it's home to a bunch of bookshops and restaurants frequented by tourists from Brugge. The canal drops you right into the heart of Brugge, a city I rather like. Based on the number of tourists, it appears I'm not the only one who likes Brugge. It's sometimes called the Venice of the North because of all the canals, but then they call any place that has a lot of canals the Venice of the North. Brugge has been around since at least the Bronze Age, when it was a coastal settlement. The more modern version of Brugge started in the 9th and 10th centuries. It was a strategic position on the crossroads of trading routes for the Hanseatic League. And the city entrepreneurs came up with some pretty ingenious forms of capitalism, sharing financial risk and letters of credit. It became a big wool market after making business arrangements in England and Scotland. Starting in 1277, Brugge also became a hub for trade with the Mediterranean. In 1309, the Bourse opened, possibly the first ever stock exchange, and by the time the Venetians showed up in 1314, they were basically late to the capitalistic party. Like much of Europe, Brugge has had some issues with war, especially since it was pretty rich for a while. In the early Middle Ages, the city maintained its own militia, which helped it fight off the French in 1302. Then there were the Flemish revolts from 1323 to 1328. In the 1400s, Philip the Good set up court, attracting artists and bankers, spinners, and weavers. But unfortunately for Brugge, the Svin River channel started silting over in 1500, and it declined in prosperity until the 17th century when the lace trade took off. Even so, Antwerp took over as the main port city, and Brugge turned into a bit of a poor ghost town until the late 1800s, when someone realized tourism was lucrative, especially if you attract French and English tourists. Luckily for Brugge, it was spared flattening in both world wars, and in 1965, they started restoring the original medieval buildings. In 1907, a port was opened in Zeebrugge, which is the area where I took that wrong turn earlier in my ride. According to Wikipedia, the port is now one of the most important in Europe, especially for auto imports. Getting tired of all this educational history stuff? Don't worry, I took back roads home and got to explore the famous Dutch roads and cycling infrastructure. Now, road and path surfaces are pretty good in the Netherlands. However, I hear a lot of complaining from my fellow Belgium cyclists. They complain that the paths and roads are not that great, but On my route heading out of Brugge, they were pretty good. I rejoined the canal I'd been on from Knokke, and then took the more northerly split towards St. Lawrence. This was great, until it wasn't. I encountered construction on a bridge diverting me off into the countryside from my nice canal-side ride on some classic Belgian concrete side roads. Now, what I haven't mentioned yet is that I had an unplanned delay in Brugge. The Velomobile I was riding I'd purchased used, and had some shifting issues that I was dealing with by not doing anything about them. On the outskirts of Brugge while riding in traffic, my chain just randomly fell off. Had to pull into a side yard and do some work to get the chain back on, and I'll be honest, I wasn't in a very good mood after that. The construction diversion also got me even more grumpy because it was getting later in the day than I'd planned to be riding, and I'd been cruising along really well. I also was discovering just how diverse Belgian cycling infrastructure can be. Lots of concrete, narrow lanes along roads with more traffic than I'm used to, glorified sidewalks that allegedly are for cycling, more construction, and then Belgian cobblestones. The Belgians love their cobblestones. There's even a famous bike race on Belgian cobblestones. That's when I learned that just because there's a path along a canal does not mean it's a nice place to ride. As the sun began to set on my adventure and the Belgian concrete roads and cobblestones kept on coming and getting rougher, I got really grumpy. It's really a pity because the sun setting over the flat fields of Belgium and Zeeland can be pretty magical, if you're not in a bad mood. Missed my turn. Where was it? Yeah. This crummy street right here was what I have to turn on. Oh. I am so sick and tired of these concrete slabs. This might be the single worst 25 miles of my life. It's been mainly this crummy concrete pavement, and it's insanely loud here in the QV, bumping along with the chain skipping off in the back. And for the past 15 minutes I've been thinking, you know what? I don't think I ever want to ride a Velomobile again. I kind of lost it when I encountered a short section of dirt road at the border. What plakkenbord means, but I can make a guess. I'm so close to home, and I have like zero desire to be in this Velomobile. Belgium so far has been a mixed bag for cycling. Some areas are great, like the Leopold Canal. Then there are the glorified sidewalks, which might be brick or maybe concrete, or maybe not even rideable. Bike lanes along roads are fairly common, and some of these can be pretty busy roads. I've already mentioned the cobblestones, which can appear at any given random moment. At the same time, Belgium is investing in developing long-distance cycling routes between major cities like Brugge, Gent, Antwerp, and Brussels, which they do actually pave with proper pavement. The potential is there for good cycling, but you have to plan your route carefully if you don't want to buy new fillings for your teeth and maybe some new rims for your bike. In fact, I'm tempted to start logging all the paths and grading them to create a cycling guide to routes in Belgium that won't destroy your bike or give you a concussion. Now, in all fairness, not every cycle path and cycle route in Zeeland is prime either. I did make it home before sundown, but that was the last ride I did with that Velomobile. It turns out the derailleur hanger was nearly broken when the chain fell off, and I was lucky I made it home. It also didn't help that the Velomobile was too big and heavy for tiny little me. If you look carefully in the video, in fact, you can see me occasionally straining to see over the hood. I ended up buying a different model of Velomobile, which you can learn about in some of my more recent videos, and I'll be heading out in the coming weeks and months to explore more of Zeeland and Belgium, ideally not on cobblestones. As always, thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe so you can be notified when I upload future adventure videos that may or may not be of interest to you. Bye!